I just want to welcome attorney Asha Wilkerson to the show. Asha, welcome.
Thanks, Broderick. Thanks for having me here.
I just wanted to have you on because I wanted to discuss your unique path as an attorney. You've had quite the incredible journey, and I think that people can learn from your journey. So let's get started. Where did you go to law school?
I went to UC Hastings. I almost said Santa Clara, but that's where you went to law school. That's where I went to undergrad. But I went to UC Hastings in San Francisco for law school.
Why did you decide to go to Hastings?
Yeah, I decided to go to Hastings because while I was at Santa Clara, I participated in a summer pre-law program for undergraduate students from underrepresented groups to get them exposure to the law. And one of the schools that we visited was UC Hastings. And at Hastings at the time, they still have it, but it's been refined a little bit. There's a program called LEOP, the Legal Education Opportunity Program, which provides support to underrepresented students who come in through that program. And I knew that law school was going to be super challenging. And I thought, well, if I can get some support, I like the people that I met there, let me apply and see what happens. And if I get into Hastings, that's where I'm going to go. So that was the main reason why I chose Hastings. It's a good school. Does decently in the rankings and stuff, but it was more about the support that I knew that I could get versus like a top tier school for me.
Did you have a second choice?
I had a few second choices. I did apply to Santa Clara. I thought maybe I wanted to go to Miami, University of Miami, because I have family down there. I applied to Berkeley. I don't know who doesn't apply to Berkeley, probably Stanford too. But I didn't really have my heart set on any one particular place. I thought, let me just apply and see what happens. And Hastings was the one that ended up shaking out. What I wish I would have known, though, this is advice I got afterwards, was to take a look at the financial aid packages that the schools would give you and go to the place that will give you the most money, or at least be able to consider that option. But I was too young, I feel like, to even think about that stuff, and ended up going to Hastings.
Did you get any money from Hastings?
I did not, no. And I didn't even know to ask or to apply for scholarships. I had a full ride at Santa Clara, so that was like a brand new world for me. And I remember my mom said, she was like, oh yeah, I remember when I paid off my student loans. This is after I graduated, and she's, trying to relate, right? Because I've got tons of student loan debt. And I said, really? How much were your student loans? She went to school back in like 1965, I think is when she started college. She was like, oh, I think about $7,000. I was like, what? So it has obviously increased exponentially, but I don't even think either one of my parents, because they had gone to school so long ago, could have really even helped me think through that process, because it just was so foreign to what they had experienced when they went to college.
Yeah, because one of the things that I always tell people is that if you get money from one school, you can take it to the school you really want to go to. And depending on where you are on their bell curve, they may find some money or match or give you more money to get you to go to their school. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's also sort of a mindset shift, right? Because sometimes we're made to feel that we're so lucky to be there, like, oh, you're so lucky Hastings admitted you, right? But you have to start thinking about yourself as the asset, that you bring something to the school and they'd be lucky to have you. So negotiate from that standpoint.
Right. Now, how was your law school experience?
That's a good question. How was it? It wasn't really, I guess overall, it wasn't really enjoyable, but I had some really good moments in law school. It's tough, right? Like, one of the biggest things is when you step in, you're used to being highly successful in undergrad, and you're used to longer study creates better results, right? And it's not like that in law school. And so the learning curve to get on the Socratic method, understand what they're asking you, and to be able to present it back to them is a challenge, because nobody tells you how to do that unless you're able to meet a couple people who are a year or two ahead of you and can explain it. But everyone's already in their own world, right? Doing their own thing. But I will say that there are friends that I have from law school that are still my best friends today. I studied abroad twice in law school. I met some really amazing people. So while the experience in total was really challenging, and I wouldn't say enjoyable as a whole, I have some really good had some really good experiences in that experience. And I also feel like at this point, there's nothing that I can't do. Like if you can make it through law school, you can do anything.
Right, right. What going into law school, did you know what area of law you wanted to practice?
I didn't totally. I wanted to be a teacher before I went to law school, and I was still really holding on to education. Then I started traveling, and so I guess actually pretty early on, I started thinking about international law and international human rights, and so that's actually what allowed me to study abroad. I studied abroad through Santa Clara the summer after my first year. I did a study abroad program in Costa Rica, and had an internship experience with the United Nations down there, their resettlement division. So working with refugees that were in Costa Rica and needed to move to another country. So I was working with them. And then the following fall, no, the fall of my 3L year, was it 3L year, 2L year, or three? I can't remember which one. 2L year, I think. I studied abroad in Leiden in the Netherlands, and I was fortunate enough to intern for a defense team working for the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. So it pretty quickly came to me that I really wanted to do something in human rights, working with folks who didn't have a voice, and I really wanted to live abroad and do good work.
So how did you end up with your first job? What was that process like?
Yeah. So let's see. My first job out of law school came from the summer internship. I don't remember what we call them in law school, but the job that I had from my 2L summer. So I worked at an insurance defense firm in Walnut Creek, California, and I did well enough, and that led to an offer so that I knew once I graduated where I was going to start working.
How did you, I assume that you guys had an OCI process at Hastings.
We did.
How did you decide to go do insurance defense work? Like, how did you like balance the practicality of insurance defense versus like what you wanted to do originally?
Right. Yeah. Really good question. So I was grateful for the opportunity, but I also explored, I feel like, a whole bunch of other opportunities in the beginning. I'd applied for jobs internationally, thought about maybe going to get an LLM in another country to help me make that jump abroad. I applied for some fellowships to take me back to work in Haiti. I also went to Haiti a few times through Hastings doing human rights work down there, and it didn't pan out. So I was really grateful to have this opportunity to work at the law firm in insurance defense, and I ended up taking it not because I didn't want to and had to. I liked the people that I had worked with. I ended up being placed on the medical malpractice team, and I think I knew that before my job actually started, and I was always interested in medicine. So it wasn't my dream of being able to work abroad, but based on the kind of work that was happening and the team that I was going to be working with, it was also a comfortable decision to take that opportunity.
And then how did you enjoy doing the insurance defense work?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think it's a really good area to start out and get experience, especially if you go to a small or mid-sized firm. A lot of these big firms, they pay you really good money, but you're stuck doing doc review your first couple years, 2 or 3 years, and you can't get to any of the real hands-on learning, until you're 3 or 4 years in, right? So I really appreciated the learning opportunity that I had at the law firm. It was really fast. I mean, I was going to not take my own depositions right away, but to sit in on depositions. If it was a big case where there, 4 or 5 or 6 or 7, 8 attorneys around the table, maybe I could ask a question or two, for the firm. And so it was a nice way to get into the practice of litigation. So insurance defense is a huge area, right? It covers everything from construction defect to medical malpractice to, auto accidents. And again, I think I was placed on a team for medical malpractice, and I really enjoyed learning about the medicine. I really enjoyed, as much as possible, reading the medical records and understanding what happened and when it happened and looking up the labs and seeing what that meant. So, there's a law part of it, but then there's the subject matter that you're actually working in. And I really enjoyed the medicine. So for me, it was fine. What got tiring after a while, of course, is the billable hours, right? You got to work
Right.
all these hours to be able to bill a client. But of course, you're at the office much longer than that because not everything you do is billable. So that was more of a dislike or dissatisfaction than the actual work itself.
How many hours did you have to bill? What was your billing requirement?
I think it was 1,800 my first year or 1,850, something like that. So what I don't remember the total number, but I remember that I had to bill 8 hours a day. If I was going to be, I shot for a little bit above the target, thinking that, well, if I took vacation, right, your billables don't stop if you take a week off.
Right.
I was trying to bill 8 hours a day.
So at some point you made a transition. What was your next transition?
Yeah, so the firm that I work for downsized and I was one of the last few people hired, so I got let go. And I ended up what did I do? I applied for a few jobs and then a couple friends of mine who had been out earlier than I, or a couple years ahead of me said, "Hey, well, can you help me on this case? Can you help me on that case?" And a good friend of mine, Taiga, introduced me to a man named Aliu who had his own law firm. He had just moved into a new space and got a space with 2 office suites. And he met me and said, "Oh, well, I'll let you set up here rent free for 6 months and then we can work out something." I'm like, "What? Are you sure?" Right. And I ended up taking that opportunity. And so that was my jump start into starting my own law firm. But it was never ever a goal of mine to have my own practice. I was applying for jobs, didn't match with any of them that I really liked. And it was Taiga who was like, you're already running a law firm. You're already doing the work. Why not just, do it for real and stop applying? Just go 100% into it. And at that point I was like, I guess I am doing that. Maybe I should, give it my all and see what happens.
Yeah, shout out to Taiga. She's a great resource.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question while we're on this topic. Why do you think so many Black attorneys end up starting solo practices or their own office?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of it has to do with a culture fit at the law firm. Um, and that's such a loaded word, right? This culture fit. But law firms, especially the big law firms, are really conformist. There isn't a whole lot of room to decide how you want to show up presentation wise, to decide when you want to show up hours wise. It's really hard work. And you basically, I mean, they own you, right? Because you have this billable hour, you're under salary, but they still own you. And the competition within the firm and some can be unwillingness to share is tough. And it is hard. I think you have two things. You have that culture fit of what these traditional law firms are like, regardless of race and class and all of that stuff. And then you have this work that is really, really hard that nobody really tells you how to do, but you've graduated now and you're expected to know how to do it. And then you have your own pressure of wanting to be really successful and doing well. And then also law firms don't really give you, I remember telling my mom, I was like, I don't get any positive feedback, right? And she was the principal and she was like, oh, neither do I. But I'm like, yeah, you do, because the parents tell you good job, the kids come and hug you, your teachers tell you that they appreciate you. But in the law firm, the only feedback that we got was if you messed something up. And if you did something good, it's like, that's what you're supposed to do, right? So
Right.
I think a large part of it is separating, or maybe it's hard to separate what is the learning curve because you're new in this profession and it requires more or different things than you've ever had to give before. And the other part is like fitting in and feeling at home in this law firm and in this company culture. One thing I noticed also is that my friends that I had met at Hastings who were Black, who hadn't gone to school with a lot of white people, and just to like put it blunt about that, when things got challenging, they almost thought it was more about the racial fit than just the work being challenging. Right. And I had gone to Santa Clara. It was 2% Black people at the time that were enrolled there. Grew up in the suburbs of Portland. You can imagine how non-diverse that is. So I was used to being in schools and educational settings that were, one, really challenging, but also where I was the only one that was there. So it wasn't hard for me to be in that position and to be the only one there at the law firm because that's how I grew up. Right. But I think when that's new and you're stepping into that and you've never experienced something like that, on top of learning this new profession, it's really hard. It's hard.
Right. At the firm you were at, were you the only Black lawyer?
I was the only Black woman. There was an older Black gentleman who was there, And I don't remember if he was there the whole time that I was there or not, but I think it was. And then there was a third man on at a different office in Fairfield or something like that.
Okay.
And
So
actually, I'm sorry. I think the black gentleman who I was talking about, I think he was there when I was there for the summer, but he wasn't there. I don't believe he was there when I came back um, to start as an associate.
yeah. See, I've like never worked at a firm, so I don't really know what firm life is. And I definitely haven't worked on the defense side. I know
Yeah.
that's different.
Yeah, I mean it's not very warm and invite. I mean it's like law school extended, right? Like you might find your people, but everyone's working so hard, and just by the nature of the law itself, it's antagonistic. So nobody really has time, because if they're teaching you, then they're losing out on their billing also, right? And then, I think a lot of attorneys, we forget after a few years what it's like to be brand new, and teaching is an art form, right? So
Right.
there are just a number of social factors, I think, beyond the work being really challenging, that make it a difficult adjustment.
So once you started your own office, how did you like that versus working in a firm?
Yeah. So the biggest thing that I missed was all of the support, right? And being able to ask people when I was unsure how to do something. But fortunately, I had created a really strong community of other attorneys that I could ask, like you included, Taiga, Aliu, the man I'd worked with, and a couple other people who, if I had a particular question, I could ask. But the firm has lots of resources, right? They have Westlaw that you can get on, that you're not personally paying the bills for. They have a set of books. Like I see the books that you have next to you. The books are all
Shout out to the
available.
letter guide.
Yeah, for sure. They have cases. You can always go back to old cases and look and see how the attorney previously wrote this particular document. So even though the teaching is not necessarily top notch at a law firm, the resources are there. And so you can figure it out. You have access to all of these things. When you start out on your own, unless you're generating money right away, you got to figure out, let me go to the library and look this up. Let me see, who has a sample that I can use, but also without trying to be like a leech, right? Or a mooch, mooching off of somebody and their hard work as well. That's probably
Right.
that I think that's the biggest thing, the biggest difference. And then also just trusting your instincts, or I wouldn't even say instincts, trusting that you know how to research something well enough and that you can do it and it's going to be okay. Whereas before, as an associate, a partner always reviewed everything that went out, before I sent it. I didn't send anything out, right?
Right.
It was partner's name who reviewed it and then sent it out under their letterhead.
What type of cases were you taking?
I took two family law cases. I tell my students this all the time. I took two family law cases and decided I was done. The first one was great because it was a default judgment, so there was no contest, right? So that was awesome. The second one was this guy who was getting divorced, and like every time we'd get ready to sign the marital settlement agreement, he would come in and he would start crying, like, "No, I wanted to get a job. I wanted to do this," and I'm like, "We've already agreed." So by the third time that he had come in and pump faked on the signature, I was like, you know what, this is too emotional for me. I don't have the constitution to deal with this with you. So no more family law, but I really settled on employment side, plaintiff side employment. So I was representing folks who had been discriminated against, they'd lost their jobs, or they'd been demoted based on a protected category of age, race, religion, ethnicity, or if they had complained about some kind of protected activity.
And then how did your like work-life balance shift versus when you were working for the firm and then when you had your own office?
Yeah. So, I mean, the good thing and the bad thing is that you can work as little or as much as you want when you have your own practice, right? So you can set it up any way that you want to. And what I learned later is that you can change to make things fit what you want your business model to look like. The traditional practice for most solos, right, is setting up a litigation practice. And especially coming from the firm, you think you've got to be there all day, all day and all night, right? And that's what most attorneys do. But a few years ago, I got burnt out and I decided there was a point where I got really burnt out and I thought, okay, let me figure out what I'm good at and what I like to do. And I really like to teach, which I'm sure we'll get into on my non-traditional
Right.
career path, right? But I thought, okay, how can I teach about the law and have clients pay me? And so that sort of morphed into working for defense side or advising small businesses that had employees and doing trainings on how do you hire your first employee? What do you need to know about this new law that came down? And so I was still studying the law, but then I was teaching and hosting classes and workshops for people that was different from, of course, the traditional, litigation model. So it's nice because you can do anything that you want, but it's also a challenge because you can do anything that you want. So, until you're able to hire a team to work to make money in the background for you, you're doing all of the work, right? But you can decide to go home and have lunch with your kids, or cut off early and go to happy hour, but you can't do that same thing when you work at the law firm.
How hard was it to make that transition doing plaintiff stuff to basically almost being like a consultant for small businesses?
Yeah. So it was easy in terms of like the desire to want to do it, but I didn't, I'd always been told you shouldn't work on both sides of the fence at the same time, right? Like I shouldn't be representing plaintiffs and also be representing employers. And so I'd closed down all the litigation cases and then came back and said, okay, let me do defense. I won't even call it defense side because I didn't really want to litigate. I just wanted to be a consultant. But what I should have been doing is cultivating those cases while I was closing down the plaintiff side work. And so that transition for me for a year was really tough because I was now trying to get clients in a different arena. It was also challenging because a lot of small business owners don't understand why they should have you on retainer. Right. And then when you do the classes, like you got to get enough volume, to be able to get people in there to start making the money. So it was a transition, but I don't think it was a bad one. It was challenging, but I'm glad I did it.
When you say retainer can you explain that for the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So retainer is most businesses, or if you're doing defense side work, your law firm's probably going to be on retainer, meaning that the client pays a certain amount of money per month and gets X number of hours from you or from the law firm. So my idea was to have, businesses on retainer be from $5,000 to $10,000 a month, for I don't know, maybe 25 hours worth of work a month, something like. I don't remember what my exact numbers were, but to have that reoccurring revenue as a business owner, and then for me as a business owner, right, for the law firm, and then have the clients have access to me and trust that if something came up, they'd be able to get to me when they needed it. But the small folks who I really wanted to help didn't have enough money for all of that, right? And then to go medium size, I felt like I needed a bigger team to be able to do all the work that they needed to have done.
And so at some point you started to teach junior college classes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd mentioned that time of getting burnt out. I got completely burnt out. And at the time, what did I do? I went back to business school, actually. I went and got my MBA. And I keep saying that you never could have told me in law school that I was going to go back to school, but I guess that's not entirely true because when I was in law school, I was looking up PhD programs for education because I was still really wanting to do this education thing and I wanted to do international education, and you can see an international theme there. And so I went back to business school and I was going to business school full time and running the law practice. And because I was burnt out, I thought, let me see what's my skill set and what do I like to do. I taught adjunct for Cal State East Bay in their paralegal program before, and I applied to a couple of schools full time. And a friend of mine told me about an opportunity at American River College in Sacramento. And I thought, I don't want to do that. It's in Sacramento. Like I'm in Oakland. I'm not doing all that, right? And she's like, I should just apply and see what happens. I was like, fine. So I applied, I don't know, sometime in the summer, I think, didn't hear anything back. And it was December And they called me and said, "Hey, we want to do, an interview with you. This first one can be on Zoom." And I'm like, "Okay, fine." I got back after the new year, and then they called me back for a second interview, and I ended up getting the job, right, at this community college to run the paralegal program. So I was in the position where I still had my law practice full time, and I was in business school full time. And then now I have this full time teaching opportunity. And if you know anything about education and teaching opportunities, they don't come up very often, right? They're like coveted positions, and they're hard to get into because people don't leave them. So I thought, well, gosh, I can't pass up this opportunity, even though it's in Sacramento. And so I took it, closed down the law firm as quickly as I could, and really put it on pause. I knew I wanted to come back at some point. Finished up business school and was teaching full time at the same time in Sacramento. So that was my transition.
Approximately how many years in was this in terms of like your legal career?
So let's see. I started in 2017, January of 2017, and I passed the bar in 2009, I think. So 8 years in.
Okay.
Yeah.
And at that point, you knew that like what didn't you like most, or what was your least favorite part about the litigation process?
Yeah, for me, it was really, really draining. It was really draining. In the beginning, it's fun because everything new is fun, right? And then I ended up, in employment law, you're dealing with people's emotions, right? People are upset because they've lost their job, they've been discriminated against. And for me personally, I like to be a quick problem solver. I don't do well with the time that it actually takes to just resolve a case in litigation. Like it doesn't, unless both parties are willing to settle right away, you're drawing these cases out for a year, 2 years, sometimes 3 years, right? And so that was just draining for me, and I couldn't resolve anything quickly. So, and then also being a solo, I've had different people working for me at different times, but I'm easy to get to, right? So I don't have a team of people, or didn't have a big team of people, that clients who were, really upset about the situation, not upset with me, but they could just get to me, right? I'm answering my own telephones, and people come by and knock on the door. So it was good while it lasted. I enjoyed it while it lasted until I didn't, right? And then I was like, I don't want anybody to ask me for another thing. And I knew that it was time to get out, because when you're not excited about it, you're going to start missing deadlines. You're going to be lazy on the paperwork, and that's all bad. You can't do that as an attorney. You got to be all in.
Right. I remember we shared an assistant.
Elisa.
Yeah, shout out to Lisa. And so
Yeah.
I remember her telling me about your clients calling you on your cell phone. And I remember around the same time, I had like a cell phone rule. Where it was like, I think the rule was that if I didn't feel comfortable giving you my cell phone, I really didn't want to litigate your case.
Ooh, good one.
And so, because like, when your client's got your cell phone, I mean, if you got a needy client, that's the worst.
Right.
Because there's no separation. You're always working. There's no respect for your time anyway.
Right.
And so there's no boundary.
Right.
Yeah. So that was like I was like, not every client got my cell phone,
Right. And I didn't give it to the clients intentionally, but it might be like, I'm out someplace and need to ask a quick question, right? So I'm going to call from the cell phone. It was like an accidental giving the cell phone number.
And then, at the time, like the technology, I mean, this wasn't that long ago, but the technology wasn't as robust as it is now. So like now you can kind of call from your cell phone via like an 8x8 app. But
that's what I had.
But back then, like, I don't even know if they had an app. They might have, but I wasn't using it.
I don't think they had an app back then. I wasn't using it. I think I'd started out with a Google Voice number, which is still, it still rings on your cell phone, right? So I did that in the beginning. It was like, okay, this will be, easy, because in the beginning, everything's exciting. Like, I'm starting this business. Oh, my client needs me. Like, oh, I'm great. I mean, you feel like you're in demand. And after like, I don't know, a few months, maybe a couple of years, you're like, So, it's tough.
How did you integrate your travel? I know that you love to travel. How did you integrate your travel with the various careers, either the teaching or when you were running your
Yeah.
own practice?
Yeah. So when you're running your own practice, you can decide when you want to take vacation, right? You just got to make sure that you're generating enough revenue to be able to fund the lifestyle that you want, right? And that's true whether or not you're traveling or staying put. So what was easy, what I was able to do is I was able to say, okay, the World Cup in Brazil is, June 2014. I'm blocking off the whole month of June and a week in July, to be able to take this trip, and I can block it off on my calendar. And when you know it in advance, you can work around it so you don't have any dates that come up, court dates or whatever that come up in that time frame. Whereas when you're working for somebody else, first of all, you only get 7 to 10 days maybe of vacation. And even then, you got to make sure you have your billable hours in and all of that stuff. So I was really just able to build it in because I wanted to. And then as technology got better with the 8x8 app, like you were talking about, you can be someplace else and have your laptop and have your phone somehow and still be in contact. Now that's like good and bad, right? So if you don't mind working a couple hours a day from the beach in, Colombia, then like that's great. But if you really want a vacation, then you got to figure out how to set it up on the back end so that somebody else is handling everything that could possibly pop up so that you can go and actually be free.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And what about teaching? Like,
Yeah,
how does your we've been in 2020 has been a different, or 2020/2021 has been a different year. But how
right.
did your before that? How did your travel and your teaching get balanced? Like, how did you work that
Yeah.
balance?
So what I think teaching is the best job ever, right? You work for 16 weeks at a time. There's actually more work that goes into it than that, but you're really on for each semester. We have a month off in between fall semester and spring semester. And then for full timers, working in the summer is optional if you're just teaching faculty. So my first summer, did I teach? Oh, the very first summer when I was still in business school, I taught a class in Sacramento that met 2 days a week in Sacramento. And I said, never again. I'm not driving up to Sacramento from Oakland in the summers to teach a 3-hour class, 2 nights a week. That wasn't worth it. But the next summer, I said, okay, I'm going to I can't remember if I took the whole summer off or if I just taught an online class. And that following, I think it was the second summer, I spent a month in Brazil. And then the summer after that, actually, I think that summer I took it off completely. This past summer, not 20, but summer 19, I ended up traveling with a colleague. We did a 3-week trip through Europe, which we had a great time. And then I came back and then I went to, I'm getting confused on my years, but the point is that the summers are a really great time to travel with another colleague. He's from Kenya. And so we met up in Kenya and he showed me around like where he grew up, went on a safari. And then I, jumped over to Zanzibar, and we were both teaching at the time because we were able to teach online. So and then teaching also has a really cool thing, at least at our school, where you can bank time. So it's like you're working in advance to bank up these hours of free time. So right now, after this semester, I will have worked 1 semester's worth of classes in advance. And so then with dean approval and district approval, I can take a semester off with full pay. So teaching has some, at least at the community college where I'm at, has some really cool opportunities, not just because of the calendar. But that's great. I mean, what job gives you 4 weeks off, between December and January and spring break? And not to say that you don't have some stuff to do, right? But not nearly as much as when you're going full time. And then summer's off every summer if you want it, right? So,
And then, so
it's not like that.
let's talk about, before we get to your consulting now, but let's talk about some of the other things you've taught that you haven't mentioned yet, because you also taught spin class and some athletic
Mhm.
class. Like, how did you balance that with your law firm at the time?
Yeah. So again, when you are your own boss, you can you can fill your schedule with whatever you want. I actually taught spin classes starting when I was at the first law firm. So that was a long time ago at this point. And I taught the 6 a.m. classes at the 24-hour fitness down the street and around the corner. on Mondays and Wednesdays. So that fit because I wanted to go to the gym anyway, right? So I was getting paid to teach a class that I was already going to do. And I remember I'd come home, take a shower, grab some food on the road and be like, I'd have like a 30-minute turnaround time. But it also doesn't take me very long to get ready, right? So I just had to build that stuff in. What I learned just in life in general, for me, I'm a morning workout person. If there are too many things that come up, especially I feel like when you work for a job that always has homework, right? Like law and teaching, there's always something to do after hours. So to get your workout in the morning and figure out a way to make it fit. Now, after I started my own practice, I started teaching for bar method, and I would put in my preference for what hours, what classes I wanted to teach during those days. So I would teach the morning, or I would teach in the afternoon or evening classes so I could fit it around the law practice schedule. But really, I mean, the schedule is whatever you want it to be. And I think also plaintiff side, I think clients are a little bit more flexible with their schedule, right? Because if you want to meet with them on a Saturday or talk to them at 7 p.m., they're like, oh, okay, that probably works for their schedule too. Especially if they have a job, sometimes that's easier than trying to get them to step outside and take a phone call with you during regular work hours.
Nice. And then how have you balanced the consulting that you're doing now with the teaching?
Yeah. Well, again, looking back at what are my strengths and what do I really like to do, I really enjoy the teaching aspect of the law in general for business owners and, of course, for my students who are learning how to be paralegals. And so I said, okay, well, let me put my knowledge into a class, right? So the project now that I'm working on that's about to launch in a couple weeks, so mid-February, is a membership. And it's for business owners, specifically for Black and Brown business owners because we've been historically left out of this business and entrepreneurship conversation. And so my goal is to provide business and legal education to Black and Brown entrepreneurs so that we can build businesses and leave legacies. So I have learned how to block my calendar, that I have set number of hours and days where I'm working on teaching stuff for the school, set number of hours and days where I'm working on law practice stuff and getting this project off the ground. And then I try and build in Friday afternoons or kind of my day. Friday mornings are like my catch-all. What did I not get done in the week? And then Friday afternoons, it's okay, whatever you want to put on the schedule, whether it's relaxing or adding a project or an interview or something like that, then I put it in there. So having the flexibility of teaching and the flexibility of having my own law practice really allows me to create my own schedule around the fixed times that I need to be present, like for class.
Right. I mean, that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
And then now, are you taking clients in terms of the consulting throughout the state, or are you taking clients throughout the country?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So because I'm licensed in California, all of my legal advice, I won't even say advice, right? Because I'm not trying to create that attorney-client relationship. I'm trying to make the education available for people so that they can seek help where they need to, right? So, but when I teach my class about contracts, it's general legal contract principles. But I tell people all the time, if you're in Georgia, I could draft a contract for you, but you're going to want to have a Georgia attorney review it and make sure that I haven't put something in there that's only available in California and that's not available in Georgia. For LLC formation, I've done a couple outside of the state, and I decided once I learned that in New York, you have to publish in a newspaper for like 6 weeks for your LLC to be valid. I was like, nah, let me stick to California. I know how to do this one. So the advice I think is applicable to everybody nationwide. But if I do work for you, then I'm doing it according to California law.
And what kind of classes are you teaching? I don't know if we covered the type of classes.
Yeah, no, we haven't.
What type of classes are you teaching as a professor?
Sure. So I teach the Introduction to Law course, and because I'm the department chair and the one full-time faculty member, I feel like that's important for me to meet all of those incoming students right away. And then this semester, I'm teaching legal research, and I'm also teaching torts. And I have also taught corporations. I taught that in the summer. What else? Contracts I've taught before. I think that might be it for American River. I think that's it for American River. I've taught interviewing and investigating, which is not like a paralegal per se course, but I think it's not like a subject matter course, right? Not a substantive area of law course, but I think it was a really interesting quarter to have taught that at Cal State East Bay. We got some good techniques for interviewing, whether you're interviewing, your best friend or, potential witness. We got some good strategies out of that course.
What are the requirements for someone to become a paralegal?
So paralegal under the law, it's Business and Professions Code 6400, all that follows that. And you actually have to go to a paralegal school, get some paralegal education, whether it's a degree or a certificate to actually call yourself or legitimately call yourself a paralegal here in California. So for American River, all you do is you enroll in the classes. You have to have an English writing requirement met, but then other than that, you can sign up. If you do not have an AA degree or higher, then in order to get your paralegal degree, you have to complete the general education requirements and you can get an AA in paralegal studies. If you already have an AA degree or higher, then you can get a certificate, which means you're just taking the legal education classes with us that will prepare you to be a paralegal. And then right now, California doesn't have any kind of a certification exam, but I think it's headed that way. Like attorneys, we have to pass the bar. And so they're trying to push for paralegals to also be certified. There's also this new area of law that's going to be like a hybrid between paralegals and attorneys that's developing a new area of a new practitioner focus that's developing, but we don't have all the information about that yet. But there's some other states like Washington and Nevada that have this. It's an LLT or triple LT, limited something legal technician. So in Utah, actually, those LLTs who have been trained as paralegals and had extra training on top of that can represent folks in unlawful detainer actions and debt collection proceedings, and I think some family law. And the idea is to increase access to justice, where folks who might not have enough money for an attorney can get a legal technician to help them out in those limited circumstances.
What are your thoughts as an attorney on the possibility that they may create a hybrid role that is between a paralegal and an attorney?
Yeah, I think it's fine for me. A lot of attorneys really don't like it because they're fearful of the competition, but really they're not your competition, right? Because if someone doesn't want to pay your legal fees, they don't want to pay your legal fees, no matter who else is out there, right? So the rate that they're going to be paying the technician is not the same rate that you'd pay an attorney because you have different education experience, but that choice is up to the person who wants to pay or not pay. I think also on the justice side, I think it's really good because, unlawful detainer people are being kicked out of their homes, right? And if you don't have enough money to pay rent, you definitely have to really think about how much money you have to pay an attorney to represent you, right? And debt collection, your debt because you don't have any money, right? So why not? And these things also really affect people of color. So if we can get, and the court system is where you're trying to fix these things. So if we can get people more representation at a lower rate to help them keep their homes, clear their debt, and also family law. I mean, so many people have been touched by the family law system. And if you're a family law attorney, you can make some really good money if you have those high value clients, high net worth clients, right? But the average everyday person also goes through a divorce or is separated or needs to figure out child custody. And it's a mess when you go into court, family law or otherwise, and you don't know what you're doing. So I think it would really improve not only the access, but it would resolve things more quickly if we can get additional representation from folks who are trained in those specific areas of law.
Yeah, I disagree. I think that like in workers' comp, for instance, people, there's hearing reps, so you can appear in court and not be an attorney.
Right.
So, and I think that authorizing that in unlawful detainers would be fine in certain areas of law. But at the same time, there's a fine line and I haven't seen all the legislation. I've seen the proposals through the state bar
Right.
between creating more opportunities for people to get some representation
Mhm.
and devaluing the service of an attorney.
Right. But
Because go ahead.
I think that there's a whole segment of the population that just doesn't have enough resources to come to attorneys anyway, right? So I think that there will be some who could pay an attorney who are now going to pay, a legal technician to do it. But I think that, I mean, I get questions all the time. And part of it is that I'm at a community college, right? And so the campus has 33,000 enrollments, and I'm the one legal person that people can get access to. So I get questions all the time about child custody stuff and dissolutions and, restraining orders and, that kind of a thing. And I, send out referrals to attorneys and they can't afford them. And so they're just not getting that. And think about, like, almost everybody I know their parents have been divorced, right? They're
Right.
like, almost everybody gets touched by the family law system, especially. And the ones who it's tough for the parents, but it's really hard for the kids, really hard. So I think if we can get and it's a mess, when you get in there and you get emotional and you're watching these people represent themselves and they're emotional, it's a mess. It's a complete mess. And I think, especially if nowhere else, but especially in family law, if there could be representatives who can handle maybe simple matters, maybe not all of the stuff, I think it would do good for society, actually.
All right. But how do you feel about, for instance, when you were doing the business formation,
Uh-huh.
what would you tell people to be like, Asha, should I hire you or should I go to LegalZoom? Or
Yeah. So I tell people that already, right? I tell people that, when you hire me, you get all of my knowledge and expertise, right? And if you're doing it on your own, you're getting only your knowledge and expertise.
right,
But also, there's already a legal document assistant is a thing in California, right? And most people, I don't think, know about LDAs. I didn't know about them until I started teaching. And you have to have the paralegal training or education, or I think you have to be working for 10 years as a paralegal prior to like 1996 to be able to do this. But legal document assistants are only there to fill out paperwork for people. So they're really big in family law, mainly family law, and like other kind of form-based areas of practice. But it's that, I think it's that population, right? Because if they could go and hire a family law attorney, right, then they would do that and they wouldn't be worried about filling out the forms. But there's a lot of people who can't hire, and so they go to LDAs anyway. LDAs are not allowed to give legal advice, but who knows what people are doing in the practice. But they will say, I mean, they should have on their website and stuff, I'm not an attorney, not allowed to give legal advice. And so it's kind of like that. You're relying on your own knowledge of what you're supposed to be putting on these forms. They can only put down what you have told them to put down. So, that's a little bit better than LegalZoom because they know how to fill the forms out correctly. But I just think about, people seem to get it when you talk about medicine. You wouldn't ask your podiatrist to remove a brain tumor from your head, right?
right,
So go to the people who are experts when you need expert advice. Try not to be cheap about it. I mean, you got to find someone that you can afford, but you're going to pay for it now or you're going to pay for it later. And we went to school to be really good at what we do. And we are good at what we do, but the choice is yours. If you want to use my knowledge and expertise, then good, we'll work it out. And if you don't, then that's fine. That's your choice to make. And I also tell people, go to somebody who has a license to lose. We have a standard of professionalism, of conduct, and a standard of knowledge that we have to adhere to as attorneys. And if we mess up and if we fall below what that standard is, there's our license on the line. You go to your neighbor or your friend down the street who's like, oh yeah, you should form a corporation. Why? Just because they give you bad advice. And what's the repercussion? You're upset with them, but nothing happens to them, right? You got to
right,
figure it out.
right. I mean that's a great point. I mean, I think that there's some areas of law. I guess my question is that there's some areas of the law where that makes sense.
Mhm.
But I just need to see a little bit more of the setup. But like, I feel like I'm that old guy yelling, "Get off my lawn."
Right,
Uh,
right.
but I mean, that's definitely my initial reaction because I know like how hard it was to get through
Yeah,
law school, pass the bar, and like learn it. So
right.
like, there was no shortcuts there. So that's where I'm
Yeah.
at.
None whatsoever. I think it would really be the areas that are really underrepresented. The folks who are generally underrepresented now. I don't think it would be a whole lot of like client stealing from attorneys, and the practice areas, like we said, would be limited as well.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So I got just a couple rapid fire questions. I know that I'm pushing on
Uh-oh.
it a bit. All right. So I got a hypothetical for you.
Oh boy. We don't like those as attorneys.
So if you're talking to a prospective law student and they have, let's say, free tuition or a substantial scholarship for most of the tuition, but it's a lower tiered school,
Mhm.
versus they've also been admitted into a higher tier school, but they have no money, what would be your recommendation?
Yeah, I would say so. This is what I learned from my cousin, who had her daughter create a spreadsheet when she was deciding what school to go to for college, and this was like way beyond even probably what I can do now. But my little cousin Crystal put all the schools on there. Florida has this thing called Florida Prepaid, where the parents can pay into an account, for tuition, and it'll lock in the tuition price for any state Florida school. If you go to a state Florida school, a Florida state school, then that money is already paid for tuition, no matter what the price is when you actually go. If not, you get all the money back. So Crystal, really smart, got into Duke. She really wanted to go there. She got into Swarthmore. She really wanted to go there. She got into University of Florida and a few other schools. And so she put on a spreadsheet, how much money did she have? What would she have to come out of pocket with? What were the scholarships that she could apply for? What did she have? And really like balanced it sort of like a checkbook, right? And then I would say also look at what is the job market like in the area, and what area of law do you want to go into? Because coming out of Hastings, I had no understanding of what the debt was that I'm going to carry. I have personally, I don't think I'll ever be able to pay the debt back. One, because I don't really want to, right? So I'm just kind of like paying and maintaining it. But even though it doesn't hurt my credit score, I'm still thinking I have to figure out how to earn enough money to pay that debt, right? Whereas when I came out of undergrad, I felt like because I had no debt, like I could do anything that I wanted to. And I think, especially for Black and brown kids, right, or students, we are not starting at zero. It's not, we talk about all the time, we're not starting on an even playing field. But when you start with debt, you're starting in the hole, literally in the hole. So even if you were making $150,000 a year, if those first year jobs still exist, you were still trying to pay $50,000 back if that's what the tuition is, right? Like my student loan debt was like 150 when I graduated. Ridiculous, right? You're already a whole house into debt, as opposed to starting at zero, and then every dollar you earn after that is stackable, and you're
Right.
pulling yourself higher and higher up. So, go to the school. I mean, I think it's worth considering going to a school that's maybe not as high ranked for less debt, working your butt off when you're in there, making those connections, networking, getting to know the people before you want a job, making an impression, and then counting on that at the end with no debt, rather than going, unless it's like a Stanford or a Berkeley, maybe that's going to be the be all end all, but you're still going to have to pay the money back somehow.
Right. Just a follow up question. Do you think that you would have got your position at the law firm you did in Walnut Creek if you went to Golden Gate?
Yes, I think there were a couple of students who went to Golden Gate who were there.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Um,
I think Hastings definitely helped, though. It definitely helped. But I also went to a mid-sized firm, not a top, not like a Bingham or a Greenberg Torg or anything like that, right? So it was different market.
right. So what if let me ask you this question, and this is the second question. If you could do it again, would you go to law school?
I don't know. I ask that to myself all the time. I really love the learning that I got from law school. I feel like there isn't anything that I can't figure out. Not because like, oh, I know all of this stuff, but law school teaches you how to research, it teaches you how to advocate, and it teaches you how to move through difficult situations. So the learning I think that I got from law school is invaluable. But that price tag is still like still up there. I'm not sure where I would be or who I'd be similar probably, but I don't know exactly who I would be because now that's been my life for the past, since 2006 when I entered, right? I don't know what it's like to be an adult and not be either working towards the degree or be an attorney. I graduated when I was 25. So, that it is a part of me, not the title necessarily, but the way of thinking and the way of moving through life. But I do think that you figure it out, right? There's great income potential. I appreciate that I can always take cases on the side. I appreciate that I have a degree where my mind is the commodity. That's what people pay for, not necessarily my hands or this thing that I can make, but the way that I can think. So I think that that is invaluable. Are there other things that I could have done to be able to get like that? Sure. Could have studied business, I don't know, could have started some other kind of a company. So I don't know. I think it just depends on what you're comfortable with. And I won't tell people not to do it, but I will say to weigh all the options and see what it's like. And then also just teaching paralegals as well. If you're not dead set on going to law school, take a couple classes in a paralegal program. And what's great about paralegal programs is that they teach you actually how to be a practitioner. So for my students, I teach my students how I think as an attorney because I want them to be really valuable when they go into a law firm. So if you're thinking about it, you're not sure, go take a couple classes as a paralegal, especially at a community college. It's really cheap. It's like $47 a credit in California. That's the statewide tuition. And then get some experience in a law firm and see if you like it, because it's too much of a debt to take on and to hate it, 5 years later, which is what happens to most. I think there's some really high percentage of attorneys who are no longer practicing after 5 years. And I feel like I'll never be able to totally let it go because I paid so much money for it. So I better make money for me, right?
What would you have told Asha at the beginning of Asha's legal journey, I guess, which started obviously your first year of law school?
I would say I feel like huh?
What advice would you give, I guess?
Yeah, I would say I kind of gave myself this advice, and then also just getting through undergrad as well. But like, remember what your goals are, right? And the situation, you're going to go through fire to get there, no matter what you do, right? Anything worth having is worth working for. So stay focused on your goals. Know that the situation is temporary and just keep working so you can get to the other side of it. But also remember, like, keep perspective about everything. My first year, we had a classmate of mine committed suicide. He was in my section and he had two little kids. He had twin girls who were 2 years old and a wife. And he had left a PhD program at Berkeley to come and study law at Hastings. And it was in January after everybody got their grades back and stuff. And I don't know that it was just because of grades, or just because of law school, but like that's a permanent decision for a temporary situation, right? And that's the biggest thing. Like, it can be hell when you go through it, but remember, it's 3 years of hell, or 4 years if you're part-time, and just get through it if that's what you decide to do, because there's benefits on the other side, and you have more freedom of choices, whether you decide to litigate or teach or work in-house counsel or do something else. But your law degree is always going to be impressive to people, even if you're not directly working with law.
And finally, I want to give you an opportunity to plug all your website, your social media accounts.
Yeah, thank you. So my web.
Oh, and I'm going to put them in the bio too. So if
Perfect.
someone have the opportunity to write it down, this will be in the show notes.
Awesome. My website is thewilkersonlawoffice.com. You can see my last name on there, Wilkerson. And right now on social media, I'm probably the most active on Instagram. So that's the only place I really like to hang out right now. So Asha Wilkerson, ESQ on Instagram. You can see what's happening in the law practice, some of what's happening in my real life, although not too much, but it's a good place to connect with me.
Okay, perfect. I want to thank you again for coming on. It's been a pleasure. I'm glad you're able to share the jewels and all the life advice you have for those who watch. I think it was very informative.
Absolutely. Thanks for inviting me.
All right. Thanks, Asha. Until next time.
All right.